presented a PowerPoint to them, did you not?
Yes, ma'am.
I'm not going to go over everything in the
Fine.
PowerPoint, but the members on the committee in the PowerPoint were Kevin Berry, you, John Rame, and you agree that he is a social studies specialist?
Yes,
And the Dr. Tony Griffith, and she is counseling, correct?
correct.
And Autumn Doughton was the parent?
She was the parent for some of the other books that we were reviewing. I believe that Prentice, whose name I can't print her last name, was the parent that was representing the book A is for Activists.
Okay. And did you explain to the committee the 4 requirements under the statute for inclusion?
Yes, the selection for library materials, yes.
Okay. Did everybody read the book?
Yes,
And then did they discuss the book?
yes.
What was the consensus?
The consensus was that it was a difficult concept, maybe, but that it still met the selection criteria based on the peer-reviewed journals and the publisher recommendations, which is what school library media specialists use to select their library materials. And so based on the fact that it met the selection criteria, they felt that the book should stay in the library.
Okay. Now, you heard Dr. Marule comment that you did not fill out a form.
Right.
Why not?
I
Did
I
not
didn't check
sign.
the box. It was simply an error on my part. It was my first time actually voting. I forgot that I was supposed to vote, so I just didn't check the box. That was my error.
Was your vote a consensus with the other members?
Oh, absolutely, yes, ma'am.
Okay. I think that may be all I have to ask you at this point. Thank you.
Dr. Mira?
Okay. Hello, Mr. Ball. Just some housekeeping from her questions. When you mentioned that several books at a time were being evaluated, you're just talking at the district level, not at the school level. Is that correct?
Correct.
Why did I not receive the names of the council members or receive a response to my request to date for them?
That is not a question for me. I'm not responsible for that information. That information is required through the staff attorney.
And I guess I can't call you as a witness, right?
No.
Okay. Was there a public records request for my information by the WUFT?
I am not aware of who submits public records requests.
Did you give my personal information directly to WUFT?
No, I did not.
Excuse me, Dr. Mira, can't understand you. Maybe it's,
All right.
yes.
Should I repeat the question for you?
No, I heard it, but it was mumbled.
Okay. I did do a public records request, and I have not received the information. However, my information was readily given to the journalist, and she attributed it to you. So I'll leave that there. Okay. Now you shared as, oh, hang on, let me go back. Did you have to do the instructional media training?
Yes, I did. Several times.
Okay. Well, then you know that there's, on slide 31, as I introduced to Mr. Berry, there's common selection criteria for instructional materials, library materials, and reading lists.
Right. And I might add that in regards to that training, the Florida Association of School Library Media Specialists, Florida Association of Supervisors of Media have all been working towards help getting the state to separate the two, because when we select library materials, they are not intended to be used in the classroom. So we do not measure the amount to which there will be instruction involved, because library materials are designed for free selection and independent reading by students. They are not selected based on how much classroom instruction will be included with that library book. I don't think teachers are going to be using Diary of a Wimpy Kid to be teaching from.
So you disagree with the slides that were presented as training from the Florida Department of
They
Education?
were training from the Florida Department of Education for library and instructional materials. There are some places where that does overlap.
Is my battery dead? Oh, there it is. I understand. I'm referring specifically to slide 31, which is common selection criteria for instructional materials, library materials, and reading lists. So these are materials that would apply to both instructional materials for the classroom and the library.
Not necessarily.
It says common selection criteria
I'm
for
aware of what
instruction.
the slide says.
Let me read to you the transcript that accompanies the slide then.
I'm also aware of what that says.
And it says that it applies to both.
I am aware. We do not select library materials based on what is going to be read in the classroom.
I'm sorry, you're aware of what the criteria is, you just disagree with it.
There is criteria for school library material selection earlier in the training that applies specifically to library materials. Those are the criteria that school library media specialists use to select library materials.
I'm happy to go back to slide 11, which is in that section that you're
Dr.
talking about.
Muro, confrontational. Let's get the question, please.
I'm having a hard time because these guidelines are established by the state. They're part of the training, they apply to both, and I'm hearing that she is disregarding it because she doesn't like the organization of the.
That's interpretation.
Right.
Dr. Duval, Ms. Duval
trying to
answered the
understand.
question, so.
The question again.
Okay, so slide 31, common selection criteria for instructional materials, library materials, and reading lists. Factors to consider for any material include avoiding unsolicited theories that may lead to student indoctrination. Did you use this factor as you were considering the appropriateness of this text for the library?
No.
Well, this is fun. I'll just keep going then. Slide 11. You know, I just want to reflect that, as Mr. Berry said about keeping your political opinions out of your professional judgment, that sounds like one of these places where your political opinion is clouding your professional judgment.
Dr. Muro,
This
commentary.
is inappropriate.
So
Yes.
sorry.
This is not a place for her to take a stand and and preach.
I think the witness took the stand, so.
Ma'am,
Questions, Dr. Muro, please.
Yes, ma'am. Slide 11. Determining if, this is for library materials, determining if they are suited to student needs and appropriate for age and grade level. Considerations should include the accurate portrayal of the state's broad racial, ethnic, socioeconomic, and cultural diversity without bias or indoctrination. Did you apply this consideration when selecting or voting on the appropriateness of this text for the school library?
No. It's library materials.
This is for library materials. So you know that this applies to library materials, and you did not take it into
I
consideration?
don't argue with you.
Question,
I'm
Dr.
aware of what
Muro.
the statute says, and I'm also aware of what selection criteria is for school library materials.
Do you have something to point to that speaks differently than what I'm reading from the
I know.
training?
Dr. Muro, please, in essence of time, questions, please, not commentaries.
Okay. I lost my train of thought. Oh. Did you intentionally not include this informative slide 11 from the training in your library council meetings because you disagree with the content on it?
I included the information that is in the state statute for selecting library materials.
So you were aware of the slide and chose not to include it, is that correct?
I use information from the state statute when my slides are presented.
You did include slide 4.
I included a statement from slide 4. Yes.
So you cherry-picked the content from the guiding criteria for selection to make your argument to the library councils of which books should be selected according to which criteria.
The quote I made from the state training had nothing to do with library selection criteria.
The primary objective of the Library Media Center is to implement, enrich, and support the educational program of the school. The Library Media Center shall provide a wide range of materials on all levels of difficulty with diversity of appeal and with representation of different points of view. That is in your exhibit of,
Correct.
okay, I rest.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Paul. Are there any other witnesses? Attorney Siegel.
I have nothing further, ma'am.
Thank you. We rest. We're going to take a 5-minute recess, and then we will have a 5-minute max closing statement from each, the petitioner and the district. 5-minute recess, please. I call this meeting back to order, please. This hearing back to order. At this time, we will have the closing statements, and we will begin with the petitioner. Dr. Murrell, you may have your closing statement, please.
Okay. All right, I just want to, it's not part of my statement here, but based on what just occurred, I just want to make it very clear. There's a statute, and then there's an interpretation of the statute by the Department of Education, which they presented in their training manual. They said how to interpret the statute is along these considerations. To arbitrarily choose to reject those considerations is not appropriate for a professional employee of the district. And to do so for partisan reasons, because you're actively trying to change the criteria or the interpretation of the criteria, points, again, to political motives behind applying the statutes. As Mr. Berry and I agreed, we all have our political biases, but we need to set them aside to make professional decisions according to criteria that's been selected democratically. With that, here's my prepared statement. In closing, I want to reiterate the findings and analysis regarding the book A is for Activist. These assessments, based on examination and adherence to Florida statutes and educational standards, hold significant weight in assessing the appropriateness of this material for our elementary school students. Firstly, when evaluating the material's complexity, it's evident that the high text complexity of A is for Activist poses a substantial obstacle to elementary students' comprehension. The qualitative, quantitative, and student-centered aspects of this text surpass what is suitable for their age group, as defined by the Florida's Best Standards English Language Arts. Furthermore, in terms of aligning with educational benchmarks and classroom instruction, this material falls short on multiple accounts. State statutes and the Florida Best Standards explicitly prohibit certain topics presented within the classroom. Thus, this book could not be supported or supplemented by classroom instruction. Additionally, the contents do not align with the established K-5 standards and benchmarks. A crucial aspect for selection is the accurate portrayal of diversity without bias or indoctrination. Regrettably, A is for Activist does not fulfill this criterion. Rather than offering a balanced portrayal, it promotes a specific ideological stance that isn't developmentally appropriate for young minds and meets the definition of indoctrination. Sorry, I got a little cold out there and I'm like shivering. Okay, 1 second. Considering the age and grade level of our students, the disparity in opinion among the reviewers regarding its appropriateness is telling. The mismatch between the intended audience and the material's content creates confusion. The book, while evidently aimed at toddlers, employs a vocabulary correlated to middle schoolers and discusses topics that far exceed the cognitive capacity of elementary students. Moreover, the maturity level required to engage with the philosophical and political themes in this book is beyond what our K-5 students possess. Attempting to delve into such complex and ideological concepts at this developmental stage is unsuitable and potentially detrimental. When we weigh the cautions raised by various reviewers, the predicted hesitancy to read this book aloud before the Florida Board of Education, and the absence of a balanced alternative, such as D is for Democracy, within the school's collection, it becomes evident that caution should prevail and A is for Activist should not be included in the Terwilliger School Library. In addition, both the school and the district level reviews yielded notably uncertainty among council members concerning the book's target age, and appropriateness. The suggestion to maintain the book in circulation at different levels mirrors this uncertainty, notably compounded by the district media specialist's failure to provide in writing a recommendation breaching her own protocol. It is additionally concerning that council members were not fully informed of the Department of Education's guidance, particularly the emphasis on avoiding books with bias and indoctrination. The numerous irrelevant comments about the Dewey Decimal System categorization and parental access limitations reveals a lack of focus and guidance within the committee's review process. These off-topic deliberations indicate a diversion from essential considerations, highlighting a lack of direction and cohesion in the committee's evaluation. Additionally, it is essential to acknowledge the historical repercussions of Marxist-driven ideologies. The tragedies of the 20th century stand as a somber reminder of the dangers of unchecked ideologies. Mao's China witnessed the loss of millions of lives due to the ideological fervor of the Cultural Revolution, while Stalin's Soviet Union endured widespread suffering and loss. Combined, these losses greatly outnumber the more often discussed victims of the Holocaust. The ideologies that drove such atrocities still remain to devastating detriment of the societies such as North Korea, China, Cuba, Vietnam, and Laos. If you are set on turning our school media centers into ideological battlegrounds, you have the responsibility to at least know which ideology you are promoting. As we all know, those who don't know history are doomed to repeat it. We must learn from history to make informed, thoughtful decisions that safeguard our children's intellectual development. In closing, I urge the board to reflect on these substantial concerns and consider the comprehensive evidence presented. Let us prioritize our children's education by selecting materials that align with the established standards, promote diverse perspectives without bias, and nurture a conducive learning environment for all. Thank you for your attention and consideration.
Thank you, Dr. Mill, for your closing statement.
Dr.
Attorney Siegel?
Jackson, very briefly. Dr. Marule makes a great deal out of indoctrination by this book. Mention of a topic is not indoctrination on that topic. Mention of the words radical reds, the headline said, ruinous rioters, the rumors spread, rabble-rousing riffraff, really, with a bunch of pictures, does not indoctrinate a small child or even a fifth grade child to communism or Marxism. Reading a picture of a fellow with a mask on his face and a big Z, and Z is for Zapatista, saying that word does not indoctrinate a child to become a violent guerrilla. Looking at this picture of a blue donkey and a red elephant with a cap on his head doesn't indoctrinate a child right away into any kind of thing other than it's a picture of an elephant and a donkey. And the words are little d democracy, more than voting, you'll agree. Dinosaurs, dictators detest it. Donkeys don't get it. But you and me, we demand equality. That does not indoctrinate a child into any kind of different ideology. I will stand by my statement in opening. This is not about a fight between Dr. Marule's right-wing ideology and anything else. We have books in the library that promote more conservative areas, books in the library that promote more liberal areas. This happens to be one on the liberal side. If she would like to recommend a book for us to look at on the conservative side on ABCs, we'll be happy to do so. But that, in and of itself, a difference with her opinion, is not sufficient to remove this book from the shelf. Thank you.
Thank you. Closing, final statement from myself, the hearing officer. After this hearing is held, within 14 days of the date of this hearing, there will be a submitted recommend order to the board, understanding there are 14 days, and a written recommendation will be made to the board. The board shall consider the recommended order and enter a final order at a publicly noted board meeting. The board's decision is final and not subject to further petition or review. Are there questions?
I do have questions. So, just so I can understand this in layman terms, you walk away from this, you evaluate
I'm sorry, I can't understand.
to understand this in layman's terms, you walk away from here, you evaluate everything you've heard and seen, you make a recommendation to the board within the next 14 days. The board then votes on this or does not vote on this?
The board will accept it through a vote. There are 5 board members.
And that vote of the 5 board members is an open public meeting for the vote?
It's a noted open meeting
Okay.
that this will come before them.
Okay, thank you for that. And then I'm not quite sure about that. There's no recourse to the decision because there is in statute that you could then challenge this to the state magistrate. Could you explain the incongruencies?
Understanding, as a petitioner, there will be no more action to the school board.
I see.
That's when I said to the board.
And Dr. Jackson, that's the language in the statute, is just like that. It just says there will be no more recourse. So in the...
I believe that's in the school board policy, not in the statute, unless I'm wrong.
Okay, well,
The school board policy hasn't been updated
I
yet
believe
with
it's
new
also in the
statutes.
statute. So if there's a complaint about how it's drafted, that's beyond our comprehension.
I just want to make
Thank
sure
you.
I'm clear of the protocol.
It's just that the complaint of this book would not come back to the board.
Yes,
Thank you.
thank you.
Are there any other questions? Hearing none, this meeting, yes,
Dr.
excuse me.
Jackson, just to make clear, January 16th, 2024 is the next regular school board meeting.
January 16th, so that's the one that would be noted to the public that this book will come before the board,
Yes, ma'am.
January 16th.
But you will make your recommendation within 14 days?
14 days, I will make it, but it will not come before the board until, as Ms. Dede stated, Ms. Talbot stated, the next board meeting will be January 16th, when this book will become before the board.
Thank you,
But in
Dr. Johnson.
14 days, that recommended order will be presented to the board. The board also has to have time to review the order as well.
Okay. And another question about protocol and procedure. As we go further or forward, if there's more challenges, will you be providing access directly to you? I know you made an opening statement to that regard.
I don't understand you.
Sorry. You made a statement at the beginning of this meeting about how this procedure carries out. So if there's another book that gets challenged to this level, will that procedure be different than what was done this last time? Because this last time, all my information came from the district, and I had to submit everything to the district, which seemed a little unfair.
I'm an impartial. I'm not here for the petitioner, not the district. I make a recommendation to the board. I hear both sides.
Correct.
No communication is done with me. It all goes through the hearing officer office.
And
Who is,
for your edification, we are addressing this complaint. We understand your position on this, and we are going to be asking one of the employees, not in the office of the staff attorney, but perhaps the board secretary, if she can do it, Ms. Green, who is the secretary to the school board itself, to be the intermediary so that things will go through her to get to you. I know you're not a lawyer, but in a regular court of law, we never talk to the judge. We talk to the judicial assistant. So Kim Green would be like the judicial assistant, and you would go through her, as would we. And then it will be we will update our policies as soon as we can get agreement from everybody that that's the way it's going to be. But we are trying to address that.
Okay.
This is our first hearing.
Mine too.
I'm not a judge, but I'm sitting as a judge, as a hearing officer. In any other legal case, no one goes to the judge.
No, I recognize my ignorance in this area, so that's why I'm asking. Okay, it just seemed very inappropriate. It just seemed very inappropriate that everything had to go through the counterparty. It wasn't a third party, it was through them.
Because we have had basically challenge from student discipline. This is new, the intellectual. But even with those hearings, it does not come to me. I'm impartial in my hearings. Okay.
Okay, thank you.